Wairimu Nderitu is the global president of Isōko Center for Humanity in Rwanda. An experienced peace builder and mediator, she has contributed to defining the role of women mediators of armed conflict as one of the few women mediator signatories to peace agreements in Kenya and Nigeria. She is also the founder of Community Voices for Peace and Pluralism, a network of African women professionals preventing, transforming, and solving violent ethnic, racial, and religious conflicts worldwide. Alice also served as United Nations Under-Secretary General and Special Advisor to the Secretary General on the Prevention of Genocide from November 2021 to November 2024. In addition, Alice was an Auschwitz Institute for the Prevention of Genocide and Mass Atrocities instructor. Widely published, she is the recipient of awards recognizing her commitment to peaceful conflict resolution throughout Africa and her innovative approach to mediation. Wairimu Nderitu is the recipient of Moment's 2025 Ruth Bader Ginsburg Human Rights Award. Joining Alice today is Moment Editor Sarah Breger. Please welcome Wairimu Nderitu and Sarah Breger.
Hi, good afternoon. It's a real honor to speak with you, and thank you for joining us. And congratulations on receiving this year's Ruth Bader Ginsburg Human Rights Award.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Sarah. And I'm really, really, really honored to be the recipient of this award. Thank you very much.
I'm curious what drew you to the field of peace building and human rights work initially?
I began with human rights. And I began with human rights because I was living in a country in which we didn't have any, in our constitution didn't carry anything about human rights. And so it was we lived a life of daily consciousness that so many rights were being infringed, but we didn't know what to do about it. And so I started working for an organization called the Standing Committee on Human Rights, and which then became the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. So that's the national human rights body of Kenya. And I was the first employee of that, of the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. And I was charged with human rights education. So I was in charge of human rights education. And while working on human rights education, we used to teach human rights education. And much of our teaching was based on the UN conventions, the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, the UN conventions on civil and political rights, socioeconomic rights, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, Convention Against Torture. So that's what we used to teach. But the knowledge was good, but often we would be asked by those we were teaching, how do we apply this practically in our lives? It's not reflected in our constitution. So how do we, like, for example, how do you protect yourself against torture, for example, if you are arrested and you're tortured? Who do you report to? Because we didn't have anybody to report that kind of thing to. So it was a space, it was rewarding to teach about human rights, because in teaching, then you understand the scope, like how wide opportunities are to protect human rights. But at the same time, I also understood the limitations based on the country that I came from. And then another limitation came up, because we would be teaching human rights in the villages. And in parts of Kenya, in some parts of Kenya, there were ethnic conflicts, like conflicts between ethnic communities. And people would say, thank you very much for teaching us about these conventions, but we want to know how to end these conflicts. And so I was in this space of, what do I do? Like, I need to find more knowledge so that what I'm doing can be useful. I'm a very passionate person. Like, when I start doing something, I really do it with all my heart and soul. So I threw myself into human rights and understanding how you can work on human rights and build peace. Then I learned that human rights and peace building don't even get along. They're like oil and water, because human rights activists pursue justice, and then peace builders are pursuing peace. Peace builders will sit with people who've committed war crimes if they can come to the table and guarantee peace. And human rights activists will not have any of that. They'll advocate for these guys to be held accountable. So then I found myself in that space. And coincidentally, one of my colleagues was taking a course. Oxford University had partnered with the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights and was offering a course on human rights and conflict prevention. And so the colleague who was taking this course was not doing well. He was not keeping up. He was not going to class. It was an online course, the old online courses that were done through email. And he was complaining. We were in the field, and he said, "Oh, I wish I didn't have to do this course." And I told him, "Let me do it for you." And then, so I did the course, and then that course completely changed the trajectory of my career, because then I understood how you can work on conflict prevention and human rights, how knowing conflict prevention and peace building, how understanding conflict prevention and peace building can make you a better human rights educator. So, and I carried to the conflict prevention field, the peace building field, I carried the human rights principles of accountability, of equality, everybody, equality and equity, of interdependence of rights. I carried all that to the conflict prevention field. And so then I started working on conflict prevention, and it began to make huge meaning to the communities we were working with, because even if the Constitution didn't speak about peace building, at least we had traditions to fall back on. What did we do in the past? How did people solve conflicts? How did we mediate? How did we arbitrate? And so then I got into that mediation space that way, like practically solving the issues that were happening on the ground. And so you were in a village, and the dispute is around, it used to be a lot about resources. So grazing fields and water points. And so decisions about who gets to the water point first and for what time. And that kept growing, so that then the water point became that space where people could feel they are safe, a safe zone. So anyway, so that's how it all came together. So there's always, because then I ended up being really good at mediation and taking many courses in mediation. I went back to the university, did a master's degree in armed conflict and peace studies. And so I became like very knowledgeable in that field. And I got to the point where mediation became what I did most of the time. So of mediation of armed conflict, of people with weapons, and where I would combine my human rights knowledge and my peace building knowledge and conflict prevention knowledge to be a good mediator.
Was this on a national level, or did it become kind of an international level?
Initially, it was at a national level, because then I was working for the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. And then I moved and went to work for an international NGO called Fahamu, that had its headquarters in Oxford. And I then started working in Zimbabwe, in Ethiopia, on all these ethnic conflicts, Nigeria. And then after Fahamu, then we had post-election violence in Kenya. And the former Secretary General Kofi Annan came to help us sort out. And he created a number of commissions to implement the agenda and that he had for peace building, the long-term agenda. So I ended up in this commission as a commissioner, working on ethnic and race relations in Kenya. Very deeply divided societies, and divided in so many ways. So we worked at so many levels. The levels of stereotypes, which people consider harmless, but I'm quite harmless. The level of actual violence, the prejudices, the stereotypes, the violence, and how they all come together. I would say worked with the levels in society where you have people who are prejudiced to each other, and then you hear them mouthing stereotypes about other ethnic communities, which translates into discrimination. And then when people realize they can get away with discrimination, then it becomes violence. And that, for me, my national level experience, because now I was working at the policy level, I was a policymaker. So, and I had all this grassroots experience. When I was at the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, for example, I had been awarded a Commonwealth Exchange Scholarship. So I went to South Africa and for an year, and I worked with the Department of Education. And at that time, we were unpacking, like we were taking apartheid out of education. And so I came as a policymaker, I had now a lot of experience and putting my country back together, having extremely difficult conversations. One of the things that we did was I put together a team of media practitioners and like experts on anthropology and on really, because we wanted to understand why ethnic communities, people think as communities and why they think that way. And so we ended up like designing processes, several processes for ending the deep divides that existed in Kenya. And we had dialogues. I led a dialogue that was on national TV in the whole of Kenya. We went to all the big cities in the country and smaller cities as well. We had from all ethnic communities. We asked them who they have grievances against and why they have grievances against them and what needs to be done. So we designed a process that spoke to people and spoke to their needs. People felt heard, and especially because it was on national television. So people felt like somebody really is hearing like what I'm saying. And then we followed up with the implementation of all that we did. We mediated many like conflicts, boundary conflicts, all kinds of conflicts. So after I finished my term at the National Cohesion and Integration Commission, I then moved to Nigeria and began working on the conflicts in Nigeria, armed conflict. We lost so many people. Initially, I went there. There was somebody who was working there as a mediator, and I went to support him to bring women on board because the communities wouldn't have the women. So we had to be so strategic in terms of how do you bring women on board a mediation process when men sit there and say, I'm speaking for myself, I'm speaking for the ethnic community, and I'm speaking for my family. Well, when a woman sits there, the expectation is that she's speaking only for herself. So we did a lot of work. We created a parallel process with the women professionals from a city called Jos in Nigeria, or the lawyers, the doctors. We created our own peace process, and we were taking what the men were discussing and analyzing it with like an eye on women's issues and how women's issues are being represented. And finally, we had our own peace agreement. They had their own peace agreement. And when we showed up and told them, here is our peace agreement, now they agreed to get the women on board. So then the negotiating teams, all of them, they got a woman each. So we did end up having women representation sitting among the elders. And then the gentleman who was leading this, who was mediating, unfortunately got sick. And he passed on later, but he handed over to me. And so now I became the lead mediator. I was playing the role that he was playing before. So, and I was still, so we moved to another part of Nigeria called Southern Kaduna. Southern Kaduna has, I think, one of the most protracted conflicts in the whole of Nigeria. Very deep conflicts between Muslims and Christians, between ethnic communities. And I went there, and we had, in Jos, where we were first, we were mediating between 8 ethnic communities. But this process where I was now the lead mediator, the process, I was the mediator, not even the lead mediator. There was no other mediator. We had 29 ethnic communities, 29 distinct ethnic communities. So we divided them up into the locations, the regions that they came from, so that then at any given time, we had 6 ethnic communities in the room, but all coming from the same geographical space. And then we designed this conflict analysis of the issues that were happening to them per location. Then we designed a dialogue process. And it took us 1 year, but we finally got a peace agreement. And I was mediator. And I was the only woman who had been a mediator of armed conflict. They hadn't seen a woman mediating armed conflict ever. And it used to be a big deal. People would come to take photos. The pressure on me was very intense.
Yeah.
And first I was considered young because I was in my 40s. So I started to dress old, like I would wear, like, that's why I started wearing headscarves from. I never wore headscarves before. So I started wearing headscarves. I started wearing, dresses. And what I'd learned from the previous process that we were in is that if you're a male mediator, my colleague, he used to wear he had one coat, which he would wear, and then he would launder it at the end of the week, and then he would wear it the following week. No big deal. Nobody was bothered about his clothes, but I couldn't do that. So with a woman, you are judged at so many levels. And for me, I decided that I would never allow people to discuss what I'm wearing. I want them to concentrate on what I'm saying. So I started dressing like an ordinary Nigerian woman so that I don't stand out. And I would wear my headscarf, I would wear my long dress, and I would sit there and I would research on the particular conflict that we were dealing with. I would do lots of readings and I would speak to a lot of people. And then I had a team of advisors, Nigerian advisors, who would also help. But also, to break the ice, I used storytelling. So I had many, many short stories. At some point, I wanted to publish them into a book. So I had put them together. I should go back to that idea. But I used to collect short stories. I would call home, speak to my grandparents, and look for stories. And I would then introduce difficult topics with those short stories, so that then I wouldn't have to say that there's a problem on this and there's a problem on this. Like what would be the problem on this particular issue? Yeah. So then that's how I did it. And so they started calling me grandma. I'll send you a story. I actually did a story about it, like how I earned the title, the young grandmother. They used to call me the young grandmother because grandmothers are the ones who tell stories. So I would tell stories all the time, but then the stories would be geared towards a solution. So people in the room would be, so like, for example, I would tell them about some villagers who are fighting about the well, because the water was always dirty. Then they were saying, your children are making the water dirty. The other side was saying, no, it's your children. And then one day, one of the women woke up really early and she found this big flamingo. Flamingos, a bird, the flamingo bird, they love water, and they were playing in the water and making it dirty. So the problem was the flamingo, it was not the children. So now that's the story. So then I would be saying, today we are discussing this particular issue, we need to find the flamingo. And so then that then would be, instead of people saying this ethnic community is doing this ethnic community, people would be saying, no, 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 what you're saying, you are not actually pointing out the flamingo. The flamingo, and it would be inform the whole day. That story would inform the whole day. Yeah, so that like is how that happened. And then after that, then I moved to South Sudan, Sudan, Ethiopia, and then I went to Myanmar in Asia. I went there to help them set up an early warning system, because one of the things I had done while I was in Kenya was set up Kenya's first early warning system, or that linked early warning and early response, like community driven.
What is an early what is in an early warning system? Like what does that entail?
It means, so during the post-election violence, when there was like violence between ethnic communities in Kenya, in 2007, I was working for the Human Rights Commission, and we would go to the ground a lot, to places where nobody was going. And the victims would say, we knew there would be violence, but we had nobody to tell. And so that idea drove me when I joined the National Cohesion and Integration Commission. That idea drove me to think, so supposing we could create somebody to tell. Because at that time, so think about it like a 911, because like where in Africa, we don't have 911. So, so the idea being like, so if you know that there is violence coming, if the police are compromised, as they were during the violence in Kenya, and you don't have anyone to tell, who else can you tell? So we mapped a whole series of people, the village elder, the teachers, and everyone who you can tell. So then it's called the Wairimu Platform for Peace. I can send you the details about it. And what would happen would be that the villagers, we distributed funds like around the country. It was before Android, so it was those very basic phones that just messaged, and we would tell people, send a message to this number and tell us like what you're seeing or what you're feeling, and they would send the message. And then we had a conflict analysts who would analyze the messages coming in. Is it a threat? Is it hate speech? Is it like insults? And then distribute them to the people who can respond. So this person who has sent off this warning, then the conflict analyst would call and tell them the issue you raised is being addressed by so and so and so and so and so and so, and this is the way it's working. So it was very powerful, very, very powerful, because people in communities were like, you mean I can actually make a phone call to this number, or I can send a text message and it's acted upon, and I'm just a villager and I thought I had no agency. Yeah, so that is also something that I took like in all these many places. I took it to Myanmar as well. We created an early warning system for in Myanmar, which was very useful for the Rohingya, because then they were also able to point out, that was before action started being taken on their case. And I've so anyway, I worked in many places now. Before I got to the UN, by which point I had been called by the African Union and asked to join they were setting up a female mediators network. And they asked me to join it, and I joined. And I found that there were other women there. There were women who'd mediated and who people don't really know anything about. And so we became a strong force in the African Union. So it was the African Union, it was through the African Union that I got the message that the UN was looking for women in women who understand armed conflict to serve in senior positions that relate to conflict. And my story is so wide, because when I was at the National Commission on Human Rights. I think that's when I first went to Auschwitz, and I went there on a program I went there on a education program because I was in charge of human rights education, and I'd interacted with the whole concept of the Holocaust, and for many years, I knew a lot. I'd read many books, and I'd also interacted quite a bit with the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. I had actually been there to Rwanda already and done some work. And so when I went to Auschwitz, then it was a very defining point for me. But when I think about my life, I think about that first defining point being when the course that I took that made me understand how you can link human rights and conflict prevention and peace building.
That wasn't even your course to begin with, so it was just luck.
Even my course, yeah, so I keep telling the guy I tell him, I mean, you made me change the trajectory of my life. And then the second trajectory that my life took, or my career took, was in Auschwitz. So this course in Auschwitz was run by an organization called the Auschwitz Institute for Peace and Reconciliation. And I was looking because at this time I'd already set up that early warning system in Kenya. No, we were in the process, I think, of setting it up. Or it was, anyway, I don't remember the exact, but I was going around and thinking to myself, I've been mediating all these conflicts, like all over the continent. No, it was after the Human Rights Commission, sorry. But because I remember thinking, some of these conflicts that I've been working on, like the ones in Nigeria, in Southern Kaduna, the ones in Ethiopia, they keep recurring. In fact, the people there, they say it's cyclical, like it will happen again. And it was in Auschwitz that I was struck by, wait a minute, like this is a different kind of violence. This is targeted to a group of people based on their identity, and they actually don't have to have done anything. And then I thought to myself, am I applying the peace building bandage to situations where this could be the case? And is that why this is cyclical? Like the people I'm working with in Nigeria, the Muslims and the Christians, do they actually feel in themselves that they can never live with this other identity, and that this identity, we are only safe if they are extinct and we need to get rid of them? It changed my approach. And I went back to the ground with a new approach of telling people, when you come to the table to discuss peace, the first thing you must do is come with your ethnic identity. So come to the table and say, I have this problem. This is whom I'm fighting with. And I come from this ethnic community. And I would tell them, as part of the storytelling and everything, I would tell them, now, can you just sit alone as an ethnic group? And when you are alone as an ethnic group, the things you say at your dining tables about this other ethnic group, or the things you say when you are at the fireside waiting for the food to cook, say them, put them on the paper. Those are the grievances that you should be putting on the paper. I no longer want the grievances of, we are fighting for this water resource, we are for this water spot, or we are fighting, for the grazing land. No. Let's talk about what you feel you have against these people. And it became so successful because we then began having discussions about respect, people feeling disrespected, saying, that ethnic community, they don't respect us. This is what they call us. We had a whole conversation about stereotypes. We then had discussions around where do those stereotypes come from. When you say that this community, they love money so much and they like to steal, and this community, you're saying that they're so proud and they're so arrogant, where does that come from? So we started addressing the root causes of not the grazing land, the lack of grazing land, but of what they felt about each other, the prejudices, the stereotypes. And because after this first peace agreement, I moved to another part of Nigeria, in a part called Southern Plateau, where I now had 56 ethnic communities. 56. We were mediating. We were holding our meetings. You won't believe it, in a football, on a football pitch. Like, there were so many. But then they had the same issues, and the issues were burning. And so we would have our plenary and then divide them in groups, and it was so exhausting. But we got success. It's my biggest success story. In fact, 2 years after they invited me back to Nigeria, they said, we want to thank you and celebrate you. Like, we just want to tell you that what you did for us was really, really good. And but because we ended up having a very deep conversation on ethnicity. Why does this ethnic group, what do you feel about this other ethnic group? How many centuries back does it go? So basically, I would ask them 4 questions. I would tell them, okay, tell me what grievances you have against this other ethnic community, and what grievances this other ethnic community, what you think they have against you. And then tell me, what's the timeline? How far back does this go? When did you start hearing these kind of things or having these deep divisions between you? When do you think it began? And then the third question was, so what do you think are the root causes of the grievances in this timeline? What would have fed this hatred? For example, in Nigeria, between Muslims and Christians, what would have fed this deep hatred? And then the last question was, what do you have in common? What is it? What can we find? What do you recommend that we do about your situation? And are there instances when you came together, and if you did, what brought you together? So they themselves, now that was our conflict analysis, they would go and do it and come back. And then they would present. When they were doing it, they wouldn't know that they'll present to everybody. But then after they finished, we tell them, you have to present to everybody, and we would manage everybody to listen to this particular group, and then we would get the solutions that we needed. So for the 56 ethnic communities, we understood every of the 56 one by one, what their issues were. And then we were able to start working on finding solutions. And then finding also the actors for change. Who are the change makers in the society? Who do we need to have in the room? Your ethnic community, who makes things move, who shapes opinions, get them into the room. And then we were able to find solution. And then people stopped killing each other. And I'm talking about mediating conflicts where so many people were dead, like were killing each other, like thousands, and it ended. So Auschwitz helped me in that way. And I then also became, I was very interested. I was asking so many questions, and then they tapped me, and I became one of the facilitators then. So then I later joined them and started helping them to facilitate the workshops, and especially on early warning. So we did all that. So that then, I would say, would be kind of the essence of my life. Like, I know there are many other things that I will not remember now, but that's what prepared me for the African Union to reach out to the UN and say, we have the kind of person that you're looking for.
And then you became you served as the special advisor on the protection of genocide at the UN.
Yes. And then I was told, I got a call and I was told, please fill out this form, and I filled it out. And then they said, oh, you've been shortlisted for this interview for the Undersecretary General for Prevention of Genocide. And I said, okay. And then I was interviewed, including by the previous special advisor. And then I was told, you've been shortlisted, you're among the top 3. And the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, wants to interview himself. And I said, that's okay. So he interviewed 3 of us. And then I got the call almost immediately after the interview, saying the Secretary General says you will be the one. Yeah. So then that's how I ended up in New York.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So on a bigger question, I mean, I'm curious, in some ways this seems very obvious, but I think it's such a fraught topic. What is a genocide? How do you define it?
You'd have to go back to the history of Raphael Lemkin, this Polish Jewish lawyer who spent his entire life trying to give this crime that didn't have a name. And because the definition is fairly simple, like just to pronounce like what it is, because the UN draws its definition from the work that Raphael Lemkin put together. And this definition is found in the 1948 Convention for the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. And it defines genocide as acts committed with the intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. Acts committed with the intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. So when I think that the legal definition is like fairly straightforward, but why I feel we need to understand Raphael Lemkin's work is because it's not possible to understand genocide without understanding how he came about this definition and the journey that he undertook in defining the word genocide itself and what informed his experiences. Because he spoke about seeing the experiences of other people, the Armenians, the Carthaginians, not even his own people. He was talking about other people. And of course, he was very, very informed by the trial of the young man, Solomon Deglilia, the Armenian, who shot this captain who had killed his family. And Solomon was tried, and Raphael Lemkin was asking, why is he being tried and yet the person he shot killed his family and many members of his family? And he was asking his professor, so how come we have the name for one crime, for the killing of one person, murder, but we don't have the name of killing of many people? And then, of course, he created the word genocide in 1944 when he wrote his book. And I'm saying all this because it's so important in the understanding of where this word came from. It was a lifelong journey to define it. And of course, tragically, very tragically, Raphael Lemkin, the word took on deep meaning for him because 49 members of his family were killed in the Holocaust. Yeah, so for me, while I was in the UN, I always said, you cannot define genocide without thinking about Raphael Lemkin and where he came from with his word and what informed his thinking.
And I could be wrong, but I think the UN has only ruled that there have been 3 genocides so far. One is the Holocaust, one is in Rwanda in 1994, and then one is during the Bosnian War in 1995.
Okay.
So what do we do with all the kind of atrocities that are occurring that, don't fall under this definition? How do we kind of process them? Where are we putting those?
In the UN, we would recognize what has been proved as genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, these atrocity crimes by international criminal tribunals. there are actually countries like Ethiopia and Argentina that have tried people for the crime of genocide. But then if anybody alleged bias, then you wouldn't be able to say, no, there's been no bias. But with an international criminal tribunal, you have international judges, you have international prosecutors, you have everybody working in that court is international. So you would not be able to claim bias. So the Nuremberg Tribunal was the tribunal that set the pace for all these other tribunals that we've had. And by the time a tribunal is set up, usually, even the legal department of the UN is fairly convinced that these crimes have been committed. So we had the Nuremberg Tribunal, and then we had the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda. We had the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia that determined the two tribunals. One determined that a genocide had been committed against the Tutsi people, and the other one determined that the Srebrenica genocide had been committed against the Muslim Bosniak population of Bosnia and Herzegovina. So what to do about all these other places where that have been atrocities are happening? Usually we ask for exhaustion of local remedies, but sometimes the local remedies are not there because you may be in a country, say like Sudan, for example, where the justice system is completely gone now. So then you have international remedies coming in. So you have the International Court of Justice, you have that deals with matters between states, and you have the International Criminal Court coming in to deal with this kind of atrocity crimes. So there are so many atrocities being committed, but always I say to people, because people run to the word genocide very fast, say a genocide is happening to us. And for many reasons, including the fact that once you say genocide, then everybody pays attention to you. And probably the circumstances you are in, you feel like if you don't say it, then nobody will pay attention to you. But also, you can also politicize the word genocide. Once you throw it into the ring, then the person you're accusing of now is on the defense. They are defending themselves from you accusing them of genocide. So it's employed by propagandists very efficiently. It's politicized, the word, it's instrumentalized in so many ways. So the word genocide, genocide remains the most difficult crime to prove. And even with the International Criminal Tribunals, it took them a long time to prove, because you have to prove intent. You have to prove intent. Was the intention there to destroy in whole or in part this ethnic or racial, religious, or national community? And that is very difficult to prove.
How did this play out when you were at the UN after October 7th? Was there pressure to declare what was happening in Gaza a genocide? And why did you choose not to say that?
After October 7th, I stayed for 1 week without issuing a statement. I issued a statement on October 15th. And in my statement of October 15th, I was guided by two things. One, I felt that this war has to end now, because it was so obvious that where we were going, that there would be casualties. The hostages had been taken, and at the same time, it was so obvious that Israel would not allow, like, for the hostages to be taken, and that they would fight to get the hostages back. The other thing that I felt that strongly about was the fact that Hamas already had a charter that said that their intention was to kill, destroy Israel and kill all Jews in the world. And so when thinking about intent, I was thinking already the intent has been put out there. This cannot end well. We need to get to the table quickly. We need to mediate. We need to end this. And as a mediator, that's what I kept pushing for. We need to get to the table quickly. And then after I issued the statement, and then the pushback began, I remember first there were complaints on social media. How dare I issue a statement in which I mentioned Hamas 3 times? So I hadn't actually realized that I had mentioned Hamas 3 times, like in the statement. But I also hadn't realized that there were not other people mentioning Hamas. Like there were very few people in the UN mentioning Hamas. So then that's why I stood out. So I hadn't realized. And then, of course, we had on December 9th, when we commemorate the 1948 Convention, Genocide Convention, then we had a big meeting in honor of Raphael Lemkin. I'd been planning this the whole year, like for the 75th commemoration. I'd been planning it the whole year. So it was not about October 7th, but on that day, so we have all the member states of the UN, like in the General Assembly, and each of them is giving a statement. And I put it out that today is Raphael Lemkin's day, Polish Jewish lawyer. This is what happened to him. I spoke a great deal about the Holocaust. And I had a very powerful panel because I had the ICC prosecutor, Karim Khan. I mean, all these people, they were all there. And we were all talking about Raphael Lemkin. And, you know, Raphael Lemkin is a big inspiration in the criminal justice world, anything to do, because he was very, very good lawyer as well. And then the following day, that's when the pressure went up. Like, oh, she had this whole event and she's talking about Jews and she's saying nothing about Palestinians. And then the pushback started coming in, and my Twitter handle, my official Twitter handle was full of people insulting me, saying all kinds of things. And then I got an email from, I had received an email after I issued the statement from a UN member of staff. And he copied some undersecretary generals, which is so unusual. And he wrote and he said, that statement you issued, you should withdraw it. A member of staff. And I was thinking to myself, so how am I going to work if I issue a statement, then a Sudanese writes and says, withdraw that statement, a Sudanese member of staff? Or if I write a statement on Myanmar or South Sudan or Central African Republic or Sri Lanka or like any other country, is this now going to be my life going forward, that I issue statements in my capacity as Undersecretary General, well-researched statements, and then I get feedback from junior staff telling me you have to withdraw that statement? So I raised it administratively. I pursued it administratively for action to be taken against him. And his boss listened to me and was kind. But after that, of course, then I got an email from another UN member of staff saying, going deeper, saying, you're speaking about Israel, you're just focusing, your statement focused on the Hamas. And so that my first statement had mentioned Hamas 3 times, but I had also requested for Israeli airstrikes to stop, but they ignored that completely. And then I started getting the threats, like direct threats on my phone, email, user, this rat, insulting me, saying all kinds of things. And then they now took it to another level that people should sign a petition to get rid of me from that office because I am against Palestinians. And the petition actually said exactly what the UN member of staff had said in her email, where she was saying 50 members of staff are saying that you should be removed from office, but she didn't put the names of the 50. Very efficient propaganda. but she said 50 members of staff. So so it was all coordinated from these UN staff all the way to the petition, because the petition was saying 50 UN staff have said this. I mean, like, this was a private letter to me, and then it became public, and now it became a petition. So then the pressure was so intense, the insults, the threats were coming in. And my colleagues in the office, they were telling me, don't read your accounts, don't read them. So one day I read and I was so shocked, and they said, don't even read them. And then at that point, then another group set up a petition that I should not be removed from office. And so then the two petitions were working side by side. And then the Wall Street Journal got hold of the petitions and then wrote about me and said, can the UN do something? Why are they allowing her to be harassed like this? And you have staff who are openly pro-Palestinian, and nobody's harassing them. She's not even she's trying to be in the middle. She's trying to mediate. So that's what happened. And it never stopped. Even now, it hasn't stopped. I got a threat last week. And yeah, it never stopped. Yeah, it never stopped. I had somebody who was impersonating, some people. I've had people impersonating even the First Lady, and trying to get me in and where are you and get information from me, the First Lady of the US. And then when I catch on to them, then they start telling me, oh, we are coming for you. We know where you are. We can treat you. We will kill you. I mean, I get it all the time. So it never ended. But, I'm very grateful that my staff stood with me 100%. It was a very difficult time because the propaganda was really high. But I also didn't understand the anti-Semitism, how deep it is, because I asked myself, how quickly did we descend into this, where I'm hearing from my fellow Undersecretary Generals that some staff are even shouting at them in meetings about Gaza. Nobody's shouting about Sudan. Nobody's shouting about Myanmar. Nobody's shouting about Democratic Republic of Congo and the killings of the Congolese Tutsi, the Kivus. I mean, nobody. So before I figured out that it was the anti-Semitism, I kept wondering what is going on here. And everybody is acting like, it's almost like there's something prearranged and I came in and did something different. And I was thinking, well, I didn't get a memo. This is what this is the anti-Semitic memo. I didn't get it. So it was very, very intense, very, very intense. Continues to be. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Did it change the way you think about the UN at all, and how it operates and how it should operate?
When I joined the UN, I was very naive. My background is a background of I'm working on human rights, and human rights is not giving me the solution. It's not giving the communities that I'm working the solution they need. Then I moved to peace building, and then I work in peace building, and I realized peace building is not enough. These people, they need mediation. Then I moved to mediation. So getting into the UN for me was a big dream come true in terms of I am now in the space where I can solve all these problems, all these issues that we've had. So the politics in the UN is something, the politics by the member states. Half the time you spend the time thinking, if I issue this statement, what will this country say? And this country, because the UN has this relationship. The member states of the UN fund the UN. So you may issue a statement that is on a state that is funding you, and then you have to face the repercussions of, did you actually issue that statement about us, and would you withdraw it, that kind of thing. So all the time you're walking on eggshells and thinking, I need to issue this statement and find a way to back myself up with this. So it's a very, very, very difficult space to navigate. Very political, intensely political. Every conversation is political. Even with when you're working, even with your colleagues, even with the Secretary General, you have to be very conscious of the political ramifications of what you do. So it changed, the perspective that changed for me was that before I got into the UN, I was focused on people. I was 100% people-centered. How do I help people to move from this point to this point? How do I help people to solve their problems? Then you get into the UN and you realize that it's not people-centered. It's about managing the politics of the member states, ensuring that if a country is being supportive in this way, then you have to balance out in this way. So it's politics. It's really politics. So I feel the UN, when you look at the aspiration, you look at the UN Charter, you see the aspirations of what it was created for. But then you also feel that it was created at a time when people had come out of the Second World Wars. It was created at a time when people were so shocked by the Holocaust. And so they were feeling like, oh, we need to do something about it. We are human beings. We can do better. But then I think that has left the UN. The moral compass of the UN has shifted to politics and managing politics. We no longer have a people-centered UN. Tragic.
That is very, very depressing.
Yeah.
And now you left the UN, and now you're the global president of the Isōko Center for Humanity. What work do they do?
So it's my life has these very interesting trajectories, because as soon as it was in the papers that my contracts had been ended, then I had Aegis Trust. There's an organization called Aegis Trust that was founded by the Smith family. So the Smith family, a family whose father was a Methodist minister, and who went to Israel when they were young, and they came back to the UK. They come from the UK, and began having these conversations in their own home, asking each other, but why don't we have a Holocaust museum like the Yad Vashem we saw in Israel? Why don't we have one in the UK? And so they decided to do something about it. And so they made their own house into a Holocaust museum. And it's out there, like in Nottingham, in the village. So the considerations of will people come and see and all that, those were not in their mind. They just thought, let's create a Holocaust museum. So they did create a Holocaust museum. They called it the House of Shalom, and they began to gather Holocaust survivors from the UK, who gave them their testimonies, their stories, and their photos and everything. And it took a number of years before the UK government recognized their work and took over. And now it's actually a national Holocaust memorial. I went there. I was there this year. And so I'd been working with them because the same family, there are two brothers, Stephen and James. And Stephen is based in the US and James is based in the UK. And Stephen and James, they then received a visit, the Holocaust Memorial, their home. They got a visit from Rwandans after the genocide, and they asked them, can you help us to establish something similar for the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda? And that is how the Kigali Genocide Memorial was created. So they built it, and since then now there have been many other memorials. So when I was working in this position as Undersecretary General, I was supporting them we were working together with them at the Kigali Genocide Memorial. We did a lot of work together. And as soon as they heard that my contract had ended, they came to New York. So James Smith and Freddie. So Freddie is the CEO of the Kigali, of Aegis Trust, which is the organization that the two brothers set up to run this. So James and Freddie came and asked me whether I could go and work with them. And I said yes, because, and I actually thought it over, and I thought to myself that this would be a good thing to do, like in terms of where next. They were in my mind. I was thinking I would be supportive of the work they're doing because I know it, but I didn't expect them to come and ask me like whether I can work with them. So that's how I got to Isōko, the Isōko Center. So now we have the National Holocaust Memorial in the UK. Then we have the Kigali Genocide Museum. And then, because they've been in operation now for 20 years, and they were the Smith brothers and the Aegis Trust, they were thinking through what next? How do we translate the lessons we've learned into something different than that of creating the Isōko Center for Humanity? So that is what I'm global president of. So I am in charge of the Isōko Center for Humanity. We are building it in Rwanda, a campus. We are building a campus in Rwanda, big campus. And in this big campus, we are focusing on 4 pillars. We have peace education, peace and values education. And then we have the teaching of histories of war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, the Holocaust. And then we have another space for healing peace builders, those who are out there at the Sudan, Ukraine, and they're working to try and find a solution to the problems, the mediators, where they can come and breathe out and get new knowledge and get new networks. And then we are building the first ever Peace Museum of the Future, where we are imagining if there's peace, what does peace look like? So then we will be featuring upstanders, people who saved people during the Holocaust, people who saved people during the genocide against the Tutsi. We'll feature them there as the ideal of a peaceful world. We will also feature the reconciliation villages of Rwanda. We have reconciliation villages, perpetrators and victims who, after the perpetrators came from prison, the victims, they had discussed ways of working together and reconciled. So we will feature all that. We'll feature peace agreements of where peace has worked. We'll, even if it hasn't worked perfectly, but still, if it's held and people are not violent, we will feature. So we'll have the Good Friday Agreement, we'll have peace agreements, even the Abrahamic Accords, like we'll have them there. So because we really want to paint an ideal, like if the world was peaceful, this is how it would look like. People would be agreeing in the same way that this has happened. So that's what I'm doing now. Very intense space to be in right now, to do all this, support all these bits and pieces that are coming together to create the Isōko Center for Humanity. And the buildings itself are coming up in a place called Bugesera. Bugesera is one of the places where the Tutsis were killed in very large numbers and killed for a very long time. So, there were other genocides against the Tutsi, just like there have been pogroms against the Jews for centuries now. It's the same for the Tutsi. So they started killing them, first mass killing 1959, then they moved to 1963, and then they started killing them and normalized, including in their teaching, just the same way that it was normalized in education curriculum about Jewish people and propaganda, state propaganda. The same thing happened. So Bugesera is very symbolic to build a campus on places where mass graves have been exhumed and where the power of place is so strong that you can never forget the reason why you are there. So that's what I'm doing, and I'm glad to be doing this for Africa and for Africa to be providing this kind of solutions to the world.
Wow. Well, I think this is a great place to end. Thank you so much for your time. I learned a lot. And congratulations again on receiving the Moment Ruth Bader Ginsburg Award as well.
Thank you very much. I'm really, really, really honored. Yeah, really honored to step in her shoes, to have her name alongside my name. I never imagined that a day like this would come. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you. This was really good.
I feel like I just watched a master class.
Oh, okay.
No, that was
Yeah.
fantastic. I learned so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I did want to let you know, I was actually just emailing last night with, we will be having security at our gala. So I just wanted to let you know that the last few years we've decided that we need to have security. Just, we don't think anything will ever happen, but we will have it at the gala. So just,
It's really unfortunate. This is what we've come to.
yes.
It's really, really unfortunate.
Let me just.
So I'm writing my speech now. I've